Hi everyone, Aiden here with etrailer. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Swagman Current Bike Rack. This is going to be a platform style bike rack that can hold up to 2 bikes. It's designed to be used with e-bikes, featuring a 60-pound weight capacity per bike, and it's going to hold the bike by the frame. Let's check it out. So right away, it holds the bike by the frame. It's going to use a frame hook to do that, so we've got this center mast up between both bikes, and these 2 ratcheting hooks that come down on top of the frame and hold it in place, I'd say, pretty well. A couple things to point out with frame hooks. They don't always work the best for alternative frames. The 2 bikes we're using today do have a bit of a curve to them, but it is holding them fairly okay because of where it's grabbing. If you do have a more aggressive alternative frame, you might need a bike adapter bar to make it work with this bike rack. And the other thing with that is because it makes frame contact, we are going to want to avoid carbon frame bikes because any sort of frame contact there can damage the bike. With the frame hook, they are totally lockable, so you have that security aspect. Just press the button and raise it up to release it if you have it unlocked, and then ratchet down in place to hold the bike secure. Now, with the frame contact, if you do have an alternative frame bike and you're worried about having to pick up a bike adapter bar or don't want to, you can always look for something that holds the bike by the frame using a cradle and a strap around the frame. Something like the Ceres Freedom is a good example. It's got the same weight capacity as the Current here, but that one has a cradle that will pivot 360 degrees. It's totally height adjustable, so it can move around and adapt to those alternative frames a lot better without needing that extra part like the Swagman Current does. Down at the bottom, you've got some secondary points of contact. Each wheel is going to have its own cradle with a strap run over and holding it down in place. Right out of the gate, these cradles are big enough and the straps are long enough to accommodate a fat bike tire up to 5 inches in width. And if you look closely at this front cradle here, you can kind of see some of the design features where you've got this narrow groove in the middle for a road bike tire. It widens out a little bit for a mountain bike tire, and it has the widest point for that 5-inch tire. So at each of those common tire sizes, it's going to help kind of hold it in place, keep it from shifting around too much, and then that strap over top is going to hold it down tightly. These cradles are adjustable with the use of this hand knob on the side. That'll loosen it up, and you can slide them back and forth. That'll help you with bike-to-bike contact and accommodate a wheelbase up to 50 inches. Now this does have the ability to tilt away with the bikes loaded. Not all platform racks can, but this one does. You want to make sure that you're holding it by the mast here, somewhere stable. And then down near the front of the rack, there's a green lever that we can pull to release it and lower it down. I will say, when you release it, it's very heavy. A lot of that weight just comes down on you right away. So if you have 2 e-bikes loaded up there, be ready to brace that weight. But this gives us room to open up our hatch on our vehicle, get stuff out of the back, or have a place to sit before or after our ride and change our shoes. Now, the fitment's going to be different on every vehicle, but I always like testing these on the 4Runner because of that size of the tailgate. It tilts away pretty far, cleared on here with no issues, so I think for most cars it should be pretty good. Seeing the bikes loaded up here in the garage, it seems pretty okay. Everything feels fairly stable, but we always like to test our bike racks on our test course. We took it out, and after reviewing some of the GoPro footage and seeing it on the back of the vehicle, there are a few points of concern that I do want to point out. Back and forth like this, everything's pretty stable. I'd say the bikes are held in really well with the hooks and the cradles, and the pivot point at the bike rack where it tilts and folds is fairly strong. The thing where I did notice more movement was the side-to-side movement. Now, this could partially be because of the frame shape of our bikes. Although we are grabbing on pretty flat areas of the frame here, there is a little bit of room for movement side to side where the frame hook might come a little bit loose. And part of that is because of the back wheel cradle. These ones are a lot more shallow than the front wheel cradles, so they leave a little less room they leave a little more room rather for the tire to move back and forth in that cradle. We noticed it particularly on our e-bike, where that side-to-side movement just was a little bit more prevalent, and we were able to crank down the hook a couple more notches, but overall it did give a bit more movement than I maybe wanted it to, and there definitely are some more stable bike racks out there. But again, with that frame shape, that could be part of the problem, so just look at your bikes and use that to kind of judge whether or not you might have similar results. Now, getting the bikes unloaded to take a closer look at the rack, The first thing you want to do is take out the included cable lock. It's not built into the rack, but it does offer an extra point of security in addition to those locking hooks we checked out earlier. This one runs through your bikes and actually locks up down at the hitch. The fact that they included cable lock is nice. I definitely like it for the added security, but the fact that it wraps up through the hitch and locks down here, it's a bit tough to get to, especially with your bikes loaded up. Luckily on the 4Runner, I've got enough room to kind of squeeze my way in here. But on other vehicles where it's a bit more close quarters, I can see that maybe being a deterrent. Removing the bike, you want to first start with the wheel straps. Those are going to be the secondary points of contact that don't actually hold anything upright. So press the button, pull out the ratcheting strap on both of those cradles to free up the wheels, and we can move up to the hook. You can unlock this, and then it does fully remove whenever you're ready to take the bike off, which definitely gives you a lot more room, makes it easier to get the bikes loaded and unloaded, even though there is the center mass in the way. Now personally, just given the nature of that cable lock, it's nice to have, but I think given that the hooks lock up, I probably wouldn't use it. I would just trust that these locks are gonna keep my bike safe, so I don't have to mess with that cable lock down by the hitch. The unloading process for the inner cradle is pretty much the exact same with those straps and the hook. The one thing is that center mass in your way. I always like to, if I'm able to, just take one of my hands and actually fold it down, pulling the green lever, folding it down without any of those hooks on there, to just give it a bit more room for me to lift that e-bike up and away. Especially if you only have one e-bike. You want it on that inner cradle because that's where you want your heaviest bike. And that inner cradle is also the hardest to load. So that at least makes it a bit easier and gets the mast out of the way, letting us put the hooks back in place whenever we're done. Something you want to think about is how it's going to fit on your vehicle. Definitely the fitment's going to be a little bit different on every vehicle, but we can measure from the center of our hitch pin hole to the outer edge of the rack, and you can do these same measurements on your own hitch to see how it'll sit. So from the center of the hitch pin hole to the outer edge of the rack is going to be 29.5 inches. So that's how much length it adds to the back of your car. From the center of the hitch pin hole to the closest edge of the rack is going to be 12.75 of an inch right here. So you can take that measurement to see if you have clearance with your bumper. As far as the ground clearance goes, that's going to be different from car to car depending on how high your vehicle sits and the hitch. But what I can say is that it does have an 8.5 inch rise from the hitch up to the rack here. So you can take out what your ground clearance at your hitch would be and add 8.5 inches to that to see how it'll sit. When the rack is unloaded, it does also fold up against the vehicle using the same handle that we use to tilt it. You can give it a pull and fold it up like that. So that condenses things a bit more, allows us to maybe fit into a parking space a bit easier. And with that, from the center of the hitch pin hole to the new outer point of the rack, right over here is going to be 18 inches. So it definitely takes up less space. And from the closest point to the center of the hitch pin hole now is 5.75 of an inch to these cradles here. So you can take that measurement to see, again, if you've got clearance with your bumper to see if it'll fold up on your vehicle and know how far it'll stick out when it's in the folded state. It's working with our 2 inch by 2 inch receiver tube, but it'll also work with 1.25 if you remove the included adapter sleeve. If you are using it with 1.25, it's only meant for class 2. Again, because this is rated for 2 e-bikes up to 60 pounds each, you don't want to overload any of those class 1 receivers. It uses an anti-rattle bolt to lock it up and secure it. That anti-rattle bolt is locking, key to the locks that we've checked out earlier, and you saw where it attaches with that cable lock too. It just runs onto the end of the anti-rattle bolt. Overall, it gives it a pretty solid fit in our hitch, working pretty well compared to any other rack out there. Some other things I did want to mention is that it's a black powder coated steel construction. The powder coat will help it resist rust and corrosion, but because it's steel underneath, if that powder coat were to scrape off over time or stop working as smoothly, it isn't as rust resistant as a bike rack with aluminum construction might be. It also makes it a little bit heavier, and overall the fit of it on the vehicle, it's pretty condensed. When you fold it up like this, it doesn't stick up super tall, and obviously that'll be different on every vehicle, but with ours today, there's tons of room for our license plate, our backup camera, and it doesn't stick up too tall to block our taillights. A lot of bike racks nowadays, especially these platform ones, can get really bulky, and as you fold them up, they start to block more things in your vehicle. I like how this one sits, and even in the folded state, it doesn't take up too much room.
Here on our test course, we'll start by going through the slalom. This is going to show us the side-to-side action. This simulates turning corners or evasively maneuvering. Once we get to the alternating speed bumps, we'll see the twisting action. This will simulate hitting a curb or pothole or driving over uneven pavement. Once we get to the full speed bumps, we'll see the up and down action. This will be just like driving in and out of a parking lot, parking garage, or driveway.
So overall, I'd say the Swagman Current is a really nice kind of middle of the road entry-level option. I like that it brings that 60-pound weight capacity for e-bikes at a really affordable price point, and even so, it still has a nice set of convenience features with the folding and tilting to access the hatch. It uses levers to do that rather than pins and clips, so it's pretty easy to use. What I don't like as much are the adjustable wheel cradles. Those are a bit clunky, sometimes a bit unsmooth, so they're not as easy to adjust on the fly. And then in addition to that, the center mast and the use of the frame hooks aren't my favorite. The center mast is just kind of an obstruction when we're loading and unloading, and the frame hooks don't get the best hold, especially for any sort of alternative frame. I did mention you could check out the Ceres Freedom for that earlier, but if I could recommend another bike rack to look into, it would maybe be the Inno tire hold. It is going to be a fair bit more expensive, but it has the same set of features where it brings 60 pounds of weight capacity per bike. It'll work with 1.25" or 2". It's got that nice tool-free and lack of pins and clips, but with that, it's going to hold the bike by the wheels, really easy to load and unload, and adjust for different size bikes compared to this one. So if you need that adjustability being quick and easy to do, check out the tire hold. And if you need something that works really well with alternative frame and you don't care about the frame contact, maybe check out the Ceres Freedom. Otherwise though, I think the Current does a great job at kind of meeting in the middle of a road, holding the bikes pretty well, and staying solid while it does that. And that's about all there is to it for our look at the Swagman Current platform style bike rack. Thanks for watching.